and welcome to the next session of FT NextGen. Thank you for joining. I am Lilah Raptopoulos. I'm the host of the FT Weekend podcast, which you should definitely follow on your podcast app of choice. If you like FT Weekend, it transforms our pages into a fun, thought-provoking show for your ears every Saturday morning. I am thrilled to be here with Ruby Wax, the cultural icon, celebrity whisperer, mental health advocate. Ruby, welcome. So nice.
Thank you. Thanks.
So I'm really excited to hear about your new book and your mental health work. It's a topic I care about a lot too. But I'd love to start with something many fans may remember you originally from, which is your celebrity interviews. Just to give some context for anyone who doesn't know.
Who I am.
Yes, in the 90s. Yeah. Maybe you can, in the 90s, you interviewed the world's biggest celebrities for the BBC, right? Carrie Fisher.
Well, luckily they can still get it on iPlayer.
Yeah, exactly.
They brought it out while I'm still alive, which is interesting. So in the 90s and in 2000, I interviewed when celebrities didn't just go on an island and eat a cockroach, when they still had talent. So it was Tom Hanks, O.J. Simpson, not that he was a celebrity, Imelda Marcos, not a celebrity, Donald Trump, ditto, Goldie Hawn, Bette Midler, I can't remember, there were lots.
Jim Carrey, the Spice Girls, Madonna.
Yeah. So, I had it in the days where PR didn't get in the way. If the person you were interviewing liked you, and I would do a lot of tap dancing before the cameras went on, it was sort of foreplay. And if they liked you, they'd tell the PR to get lost. And so sometimes we'd spend days together. And in Carrie Fisher's case, we spent 35 years together.
You became friends, yeah.
Yeah. We got married. We had children. And then when they worked, they were like a love affair. And when they didn't work, for example, with Donald Trump, it was such a disaster that it was also watchable, but it wasn't a pleasant experience being thrown off an airplane. A jet at 33,000 feet.
I can imagine.
It was a disaster. And Bill Cosby, you could see the death spots coming. It's not like they were coated in charm and then suddenly the world went, oh, who knew? I mean, you can see something pretty narcissistic even when I interviewed him. Yeah, you don't throw somebody off a jet. Sorry, I don't know why I'm saying airplane. I'm trying to denote him, but it was a jet with a gold B-day. So that's where the interview took place. And I was lucky because I could spend days with them or weeks with them. And so you watched the relationship and then we crammed it into a half an hour. And so it looks much more audacious than it was. I mean, you're watching a relationship. Even O.J. Simpson was 3 days. We did it all in a white van, which was ironic. He didn't mind.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, they were like very intimate, it was like you really were creating a genre of the documentary celebrity interview. Like sometimes you only had 10 minutes with them, but you would meet them and they would start to like you and you would do things with them. Yeah. Like you and Goldie Hawn were cuddling in bed, or you and Sharon Stone went to a diner in beards and trench coats.
Dressed as Jews, Hasidic Jews. I know, but people want to have fun. Yeah. And they don't want to be asked the same old questions, because they glaze over and the interviewer glazes over. And so if you can have a relationship, and God knows a lot of them don't have time for relationships. Well, if an interviewer can do it for you, then that's just as good as the real thing.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So in September, you came out with this 3-episode special on the BBC called When Ruby Wax Met. And you watched your celebrity interviews for the first time in 25 years. And so Ruby, I could have watched 20 episodes of it. It was fascinating. We're kind of watching them with you. We're sort of watching you now watch the interview and react to it. And not only do we know a lot more about these celebrities, including, Bill Cosby, Donald Trump, people that history does not remember well, but you've committed your life to psychology and mental health. So we're kind of all psychoanalyzing these interviews together.
Well, I was always doing that because I was interested in the psychology of celebrity, because before I did celebrities, I would do the most interesting part of my career was doing documentaries with the Ku Klux Klan and with, snake handlers in Alabama who, for religious, in church, threw full copperheads at each other because they thought the Bible literally meant, if God loves you, you will not be bitten by the serpent. They took
Right.
it literally. So a lot of them were missing fingers because God clearly didn't really like them that much. And women who sold their eggs on the internet and, you know, before anybody else did it, child, you know, beauty pageants. So that was my idea of a good time. I did that for, I think, 15 years. And I did Glasnost, and they let me go on spiritual journeys. And they were 6 weeks of editing. So this was magnificent. I mean, you know, we had Pink Floyd do the music once, but then one year they said, would you mind doing celebrities? I thought celebrities was just going to be another topic, like you would do people who sell their eggs on the internet. And then they said, would you do another year and another year and another year? And I'm not a celebrity interviewer, but I thought, oh, fame is quite interesting. That's, you know, let's study that. But then I kind of got the idea. It's like I figured it out. And then I said, well, enough. Can I please go back to the documentaries? And they said no. So
Right.
a man had to take over because women aren't allowed on television at a certain point
That's what
in their
happened.
lives. Yeah,
Yeah.
unless you say, okay, I'll go on an island and eat my young. And I wasn't going to go there, so I left television.
I'd love to get into that, but first, I mean, you know, as an exercise in studying fame and power, um, you know, what did you want to figure out, and like, what did you learn?
Well, about fame, I mean,
Yeah.
I learned what I wanted to learn, which is, you know, the effects it has on a human being
Mm.
is really interesting. It's like, you know, what does eczema do? And how people handle it and what the addiction is like. And when you stop being the observer, which makes you a great artist, and you become the observed, meaning you're looking at people to see if they're looking at you, but you're also disgusted with that. But, you know, it becomes an addiction. It's
Mm.
not even your fault, and you're infantilized by people going, would you like another cup of tea? What about a bicky? And you're 50 years old. And so it's really beyond their control. And it's hard to, you know, some people like Tom Hanks and like the great actors, or, well, Carrie Fisher was a genius in writing, so she didn't need the ego from that. And
Mm.
there's a few other who were saved, you know, and just have a great, Sandra Bullock. There, you can see the human being. And then here's the job. A lot of people were coded in the job, and they couldn't kind of break out and figure out where did they end and the disease start. Or, you know, some people think it's not a disease. It's, you know, it's like winning the lottery and now you feel guilty about it. But
Yeah.
with the lottery, you might keep the money. With fame, it'll be taken from you.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. And then if you're really addicted, some people never recover. And they say, do you know who I was? And that's kind of tragic. So when I left, I jumped, and I was never that famous. So I didn't have, you know, I didn't have the full tumor. I just had a couple blackheads.
Yeah. What did it feel like to you?
I was never that famous, but I got that I could get into a restaurant with one phone call and get into upgrade. I was upgraded in those days. You could get upgraded. So that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Then once you leave the golden shores of TV and people start to treat you like a human being, and it's like withdrawal from a drug. And eventually, you know, you get on the tube and go, I don't need to buy a ticket. Do you know who I am? Not that I ever did. Then they went, okay, lady, just buy a ticket or we're going to arrest you. And
Right.
that's when I started being interested in the mind, and gradually really weaned myself off, and
Mm.
then decided who am I? And I really was quite smart. I never knew that. And so I went to Oxford because I became fascinated with what I always was, which is how the brain works.
Mm-hmm.
But now you could study a real brain while it was alive and watch how watch it think. And
Yeah.
that became my fascination,
Yeah.
much more than celebrity. And when you
Yeah.
become obsessed on something, you get good at it. If you're faking it, and in the end, I was faking it. I wasn't that interested in television.
Yeah. Um, though the one thing that I really loved watching you do in that series that I think you were great at, and that translated into your career now, is just you know, you were so ahead of your time. Like, you did things that people thought were wacky, like you did interviews in bed with people, or very close, you were very close to their faces, or you got in a bath with Roseanne Barr, you did Kegels with Pamela Anderson. And some people thought that that was, I mean, it was sort of sexist, but too much, or this loud American woman, or Donald Trump kept calling you obnoxious, which,
Yeah.
gave me the heebie jeebies the whole time. But it was very deliberate, and it was masterful. Like, you were making people feel comfortable and it disarmed them. So they let themselves be themselves. And I'm wondering about that, sort of what you were reading and what your strategy
Mm.
was with people to
Well,
let
I
them be
knew
themselves.
everything about them because I think that's respectful.
Yeah.
But then I threw the notes away and then you just felt the vibe. Don't forget, if you really go into somebody's room and get into bed with them, they're going to throw you out. But clearly Goldie and I had been going at it for 4 hours. I mean, we're still friends to this day. She
Yeah.
was the one who said, get into bed. If I instigated it, it's obnoxious. But you're watching, most of the time they go, come on the bed because they get so comfortable. And don't forget, if you really pulled a punch like that and they're a celebrity, you're out of there.
Mm.
So it did look, because we're cramming sometimes 3 days into a half an hour, it looks much more, how does she have the nerve? But sometimes you'd click it off. I mean, Goldie and I were already hysterical as the doorknob turned.
Yeah.
So that's okay. But people who don't quite know who you are, I really laid back. I mean, there was one with Burt Reynolds and we didn't get each other for a long time, for maybe 7 hours, and it wasn't working. And then at the end, I said, put the camera down. And then he said, he started to show off how funny he was. And he made me laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to really be respectful for 7 hours. And that's okay. He pulled it out of the bag. So I play it really low when they don't think it's amusing at all. So with OJ, my job wasn't to make him laugh. My job was to get him to, expose the creature that he was. And I think I got, by the end, he was trying to stab me with a banana. To me, that's a good interview.
Wild. Truly.
I didn't ask him to do it. He just felt, I don't know. I worked with him 17 hours that day, so I can make them tired, but I didn't get tired. And then suddenly, the onion is peeled away and there he is stabbing me.
Right.
Well, there's nothing else to say.
Thinking that's a funny joke.
He thought it was funny. He wanted to be funny too. And I reminded him of, was it Firestein who was
I don't
the
remember.
lawyer? I looked like her, the one who,
Oh.
on the opposite side of
Oh,
his
yeah.
lawyer.
Oh, so
Yeah.
he had something to prove.
He said I reminded him of her.
Wow. Ruby, the celebrity landscape is like so different now than it used to be, and so many people are a little bit famous. Like there's, this like micro fame where so many more people have like a few thousand followers and maybe a taste of that. And I wonder like how you look at it today. What seems better? What feels worse? Like, do you think we're all
I don't really,
downs?
I don't, that's one thing that I don't do. I don't make judgments. The world is the way it is. I don't want to use my airtime going, isn't it a disgrace? Everybody's using social. What am I going to do about my kids? It is that way. We are this far in technology. We had to use spears. We had to, Gutenberg had to create, the press. We had to create bicycles and then cars, and because humans depend on technology to defend themselves and to communicate. It had to be this way. Now, how you navigate is an individual choice. And that's why I'm so interested in psychology, because we don't have to go with the herd. That's
Right.
Human beings have a higher brain that they can, if only they exercise it, they can make some decisions. But it's hard because, we work, like I always said, we work like neural Wi-Fi. So if you're getting into something, I'll start competing with you. There's this animal kind of thrust to win. But that's why I studied all this, because I find it so interesting. What do we have control of, and what has evolution landed us with? And that has become my fixation.
So how do we navigate?
Well, that's up to the individual. But first of all, I think you have to understand a little bit about how this mothership works.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you get instruction manuals for your new kitchen. So how come we don't get a clue? I always say it's like we have a Ferrari on our heads, but nobody gave us the keys. Now, you don't have to be a brain surgeon, but it is interesting to know, evolution, what it gave us. And it didn't, do you mind me saying, it really only cared about our survival. It didn't give a shit about our happiness. So we have to thank it in a way for giving us that, that turbo engine, the fight or flight. Otherwise, if we, and we need to have these paranoid thoughts. They say out of 5 thoughts, 4 are negative. that were Velcro for negative thoughts and Teflon for positive ones. Now, don't beat yourself up. That's why we're still in existence. If we had a big smiley face and, had a have a nice day badge, we would have been eaten. So we have to forgive ourselves a little bit. Somebody says, it's not your condition, it's the human condition. So the reason it's now exasperated, which is this thrust for, we need stress, we need anxiety, we needed shame, we needed disgust. All these things were gifts. The problem now, and it is the way it is that things that used to frighten us, let's say a predator was behind you and this part in your brain, the amygdala would activate so that you could gush some cortisol, and then take over and run or take them on. Now, this little bit of the brain, it can't tell if danger's behind it or something's happening 20,000 miles away. So with the news pumping out the fear, and we get addicted to fear, that heart clenching thing, we can't get off it. It's like Coke, or it's like shopping, or it's like whatever. And so the news kind of knows we need more. And they show us more close-ups, and there's more that music that makes it a horror show. And so the cortisol never shuts off. I mean, even back in the savannah, after a hard day's hunt, we'd all settle down around the fire and shoot the breeze. But now we're wired all the time. And this is why my first book was called Frazzled, which is a neurobiological word. It means stress about stress. Stress is good, anxiety is good, but when it's going, oh my God, I shouldn't be so stressed, I'm not good enough, I'm a loser, nobody else is as stressed. It's the thoughts that do the damage.
And that's secondary anxiety. Yeah.
Sure. The second you need to give yourself bad reviews. On the other hand, the little alarm system that says, watch it, that neighbor isn't, our instinctive thing can't work clearly because there's so much incoming,
Yeah. I mean, and it makes me think about sort of like, we want so much, we want accountability now for people who have fallen, right? Like, we want them gone. And in some ways it's very good. Like, it's a good thing that we are holding sort of like celebrities or people to a higher standard now. But also we're kind of just like, we're all so worked up about everything.
About everything.
Time. Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of, you asked me where I am. I'm in Athens. I'm not saying bully for me, but you've mentioned it. I'm so sick of people sitting at dinner tables or whatever and yapping about the news like they're experts. Saying, you know what I would tell Putin? Oh no, what would you, because he's waiting on the phone to hear your opinion. And my new policy is either get off the pot or shut up. So I'm working at a refugee camp because I think I want to see the human, so that I'm not going to go, I've seen it up close, but I've seen it up close. I'm just sick of people saying, and this is wrong. And this, I read the same newspaper you do, so don't quote it at me, but go see that human being. Not everybody can do it, but I kind of feel a calling to do it. It's like, I wanted to learn about the brain, so I went to Oxford. I'm very driven, and it gives me relief.
Yeah.
I just want to feel better.
Yeah.
So first it was going to Oxford and learning how the mothership works. And also it's not 100%, we're still in the dark ages, but mindfulness and cognitive therapy had such fantastic results when they did research, and the effects it has as seen in a brain scanner, which I got to see at Oxford. And to me, that's the sexiest thing going, way more than a celebrity, to see that there's neuroplasticity. You can say that doesn't exist, but some people say the world is flat. I can't shout it down. But we have a certain amount of, I wouldn't say control, but the ability to create new habits and break bad ones. Doesn't mean you're totally different. It just means I'm not so at the mercy of things I thought were me, like anger. I thought, oh, I'm a natural born killer. Well, those were the genes and that was the experience. But kind of by training, I learned it just poisons me. It feels really good. It's like a cigarette when you hurl your rage. But I had the hangover. So, I still get, you need fight or flight, but it doesn't last for days and days, which will kill my immune system. So
for sure. So I'm curious about sort of like the transition for you from the show on the BBC to going into mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy research. It feels like you left TV and didn't really come back and changed your career track. Can you tell me about that moment? Was it,
There
yeah.
was no moment. It's like
It,
you're out of a job, babe.
oh yeah.
And now fend for yourself.
Yeah.
But I was always interested in the brain. And so I had a serious depression, not because of show business, but they were coming hot and heavy each time I had. So finally I said, I'm going to see what's out there so that I could maybe, there's no cure. Some people are, but once you have more than 3 episodes, and I've had it since I was a kid. Okay, and I'm on medication, but if it worked, I would never relapse. I thought, what's out there? And scientific research, the best results, not 100%, was with mindfulness. It could have been witchcraft, but they weren't teaching that at Oxford. So I went there, and my professor was one of the creators of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. The guy who invented it, brought the East to the West, was a molecular biologist, John Kabat-Zinn. So we weren't dealing with pillowheads. You're dealing with people who really understood neuroplasticity, and even genes can be changed. We thought, oh, we're locked in. This is who I am. Well, this is who I am has to be changed. That song doesn't exist anymore. You've got to change the lyrics. This is really malleable.
Yeah.
And, on a bad day, I'm straight back to biting my nails. But it's the exercise of mindfulness is exactly like going to a gym and doing sit-ups. You're not getting a six-pack unless you do a sit-up, and you have to do more than one. And so it was so refreshing to know, and that there was something to be done, is if you do, and it's not for everybody, if you do this mental exercise, it's not Sudoku, it's not learning Mandarin, because you'll just get better at Mandarin, but it's an exercise. And then when they look in a brain scanner, which if you have one at home, you can look in, that the amygdala, which is in high arousal, it can deactivate, and the other areas in your brain, because there is stuff in here. For example, the anterior cingulate cortex, which is, it's a lot of things, but responsible for being able to focus attention, let's say, and pull back the reins on being distracted. And we're in a culture now surrounded by weapons of mass distraction. If you can take your focus where you want and not get dragged away, well, that's my definition of happiness.
Yeah.
So focus, learning to lower the cortisol, you're learning to focus, you're learning even, I know this sounds far-fetched, but you're enhancing something that, or you're training yourself for a little more self-compassion. It's not implicit, but I said to my professor, I don't like saying the word compassion. It creeps me out a little bit. It's, a little too fluffy. And he said, if you can sit and observe your thoughts, which is, you become the shrink in a way, rather than somebody listening to you, you're listening and giving yourself the same acceptance that a shrink would, rather than whipping yourself. If you can listen to your thoughts and not beat yourself up, he said, that's self-compassion. And, and then if you can tolerate it in you when somebody's yelling or slinging their rage at you, and you realize they're listening to their horror of a soundtrack, then you don't take it so personally.
Yeah.
Because the way you think in your head is how you speak to other people. So if they're antsy, clearly they're antsy in their own minds.
Yeah. So Ruby, when you having that knowledge and expertise now, looking back at these interviews, I'm curious how it felt to you. I'm like, how much were you seeing things that you may not have
done now
felt then?
Look, if you're in the throes of love, let's say I was with Carrie Fisher, you don't need anything like mindfulness. If we have a moment of pleasure, why would you become aware of it? Humans just soak in it, just savor it.
Yeah.
The problem is I don't live like that. But when somebody scared me, let's say like Trump, who reminded me of my dad, I went into the behavior I used to do with my dad. I became a kind of brat that was poking him, but with a smile on my face. And he nailed it. He said, "You're angry with a smile." And he got it. And it meant I demeaned myself. The questions were moronic. I mean, they were, because when I get scared, I go into 8-year-old idiot, and if I could have done it now, it probably still would have scared me, but I'd be able to, pull down that cortisol a little bit and just see who he was rather than get caught in the slipstream of defending myself. And maybe even said, tell me what your plans would be if you were president, because I think you'd make a great president. He might have hung himself. That's a smarter way to play it. With when you're bullfighting, don't run at the bull.
Yeah.
Just hold your ground and let them hang themselves.
Yeah.
With no anger.
I would love to hear what you think about sort of where we are culturally with mental health. Like, it feels like, especially since the pandemic, we sort of have embraced it much more. We understand the value. Many people know about mindfulness now. We do meditation. Prince William and Kate, they're telling us they go to therapy. Like, it's not a big deal. People want therapy. So it seems to be being destigmatized, and that's great. And I'm interested in your focus with your book, A Mindfulness Guide for Survival, and your training sessions on the first step, on mindfulness training. People who don't have cognitive behavioral tools, who sort of need to learn how to change their mindset, who maybe haven't been to therapy. Why that step?
You mean why mindfulness?
Yeah, sort of who are you trying to reach? And
Well, yeah. If there were enough therapists to go around, and we also knew what makes a good therapist, okay? Because there's the $1 million question. I mean, especially if you've got an illness, how are you going to check that one out? But basically, there's not enough therapists. So it's got to be something where people get a little insight as to what are their habits. Because if you don't realize what you're coming with, you keep slinging it on the next person and saying, why did they make me feel that way? They didn't. You made the story up.
Right.
You know, unless they're clubbing you over the head, you've got it wrong. So you do need a little bit of insight, and a good therapist would give you that, and not beat you up for it. You know, she would be gentle, like the mother you should have had. Say, oh, this is how you think. Fine, let's accept it. There's, you know, you didn't make up your script. Your thoughts were, maybe some teacher called you an idiot or whatever, but let's not go over and over that.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, people who make you repeat your life story, you start to believe it. Whereas every time we say a story, it's a photocopy of the last one. It's not accurate. But anyway, the point is, mindfulness can be done. You don't need a therapist. You're trained to do it. Like, do you need some people need a personal trainer, but other people just go to the gym. So you're taught the exercise. You're taught why the exercise. You can do it. You don't have to go to a gym. You're carrying the equipment in your brain. You can do it while you're standing in a bus queue, or you're drinking tea, or you know, there's minutes in the day you're not busy. And each time you do it, those brain bits get more and more buff, just like a muscle. And so you train the exercise. The important thing is, people go, oh, I'm doing mindfulness when I'm doing a coloring book, or I'm jogging, or I'm doing the gardening. Those are different things. You might be in flow. That was my dissertation in Oxford too. What's the difference between being in flow and being mindful? Okay, it's different systems. You know, jogging is really good. It's an endorphin. It's good for your heart. Gardening will probably, you know, calm down the cortisol too. Coloring will cool you down, and you're in that flow. You're in that focus. But when you're standing in front of your boss and he's screaming at you, or your child is out of control, unfortunately, you can't just start jogging or pruning back some plants. Whereas the mindfulness, you can be sitting there, and you're able to bring the cortisol down. And in the face of that shouting or whatever, you're able to keep, more or less, keep those thoughts down. And if you're cool enough, it usually hits the other person, unless they're a psychopath, and they'll go on screaming.
Really, what is your life like now? I mean, now that you sort of have this knowledge and you're sharing it, you know, you live in London with your husband, Ed, right? Your children live near you. What sort of,
my kids live near me. 2 of them are comedians. One of them's a coder. I've done the mindfulness course because I do it my way, which, you know, I've got a sense of humor. So I'm not putting you in a coma. And my professor, who's the guy who created it gave me his blessings, and said, yeah, you do it your way, but it's still mindfulness. I'm not saying, and now we're going to draw on a wall.
Right.
And so my love now is teaching it. And so that's why the ultimate is working with refugees, because they never heard of anything like it, but they get it because I'm not waving crystals. I said, just try it. So we do it every day. And you see these young girls, you just watch the cortisol and the eyes get softer. Of course, by the night, they're already hysterical again. It's not like, it's not a miracle.
Right.
But they get the idea that you cannot wishfully hope that your anxiety will go away. There may be a miracle, but we have to do something. And I think we live in this privileged culture. Like if we just manifest it, it'll happen. It won't. You have to exercise it. So that's why I love doing the course. I love teaching mindfulness in my way. And, I'm on to my next book, which is going to be called What's Next, which is, the book I wrote before this was called And Now for the Good News, where I went around the world and found where the kind of green shoots of hope are. That's what I call them. So I went to Finland to see how they educate kids. I worked at Patagonia Sportswear and Unilever, where they have causes and they do purpose over profit. And tech, where's the good stuff growing? Because I think where you put your attention defines who you become. And I was sick of becoming an addict to the TV to count death tolls. And so I think every book I write, it ends where it ends, the next one starts. And so the next one is now finding meaning, and it won't cost you anything. People are going, once you have enough food, what do you want to do with your life? Well, it's that compassion that actually is the antidote for cortisol. And even if you fake it, like I didn't want to really go to a refugee camp, but I feel really good these days. I let myself eat. I can, I've gone to, I don't feel guilty because I'm paying it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not going to see you celebrity interviewing again. That part of
Who would I interview?
If we could, I would really love if you interviewed Justin Bieber and Kanye West.
Sure, but they would, and I wouldn't have minded it in the old days, but I don't need their PR letting me have 3 minutes and they sell their album. It's fine. That's the way it is. But my fun was, you go out with them. You spend the evening.
The time.
Yeah,
with the time.
And they care.
It's people are interesting. I think
people are interesting and celebrities aren't.
Yeah.
Just celebrity. It's the people under the celebrity that's interesting. For God's sake, Pamela Anderson was doing Hamlet at me. She wasn't who you thought she was.
Right.
And that's the great surprise. If a PR is telling them, keep acting like your persona, why would I be interested? It's not interesting.
That's true. And the most sort of compelling thing also that I kept seeing with the people who seemed to tell the difference were people saying, sort of delineating the difference between me and that person who's famous, right? Sharon Stone, it was a beautiful interview. She said basically, there's me and there's her.
Yeah. And I don't know who she is. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know who she is. And Sporty Spice said something similar. Like, I look watching the Spice Girls, I like watching them on TV, but I don't feel that that's me. I look at myself in the mirror when I'm dressed up and I don't feel like it's me. It's like a protection mechanism or something.
Yeah, but that's healthy.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry about the mindfulness thing again, but that's quite mindfulness. Like,
it is.
Have anything you want, do anything you need to do, as long as you're watching it rather than believing it. Right. A little bit of distance and you won't get sucked in and think you're that interesting.
Right. Yeah. Ruby, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure and so interesting to talk to you. I'll just say that people can learn more about you, I think, at rubywax.net on your website. The show
and come on the course.
And come on the course. When Ruby Wax Met on the BBC is the show. And you can follow the FT Weekend podcast where you listen to podcasts. Sorry.
And they can buy a Mindfulness Guide for Survival. And that's the last of my plugs.
Ruby, thanks again for taking some time out.
Thanks a lot.